Hey there, Brian.
Howdy.
I think something broke in Zoom recently that I can share a screen, but I can't stop sharing without crashing the app. So today would be a Brandon does not share screens day. Sasha, I was looking all over to see if we had anything for image spec. I didn't see much in there. Not kicking you out. I was just trying to find something to put up in the beginning of the meeting. And I'm like, don't see anything we need to pick today. There's some conformance stuff we could chat about. CI pipeline's broken over there. Hey there, Joy.
Hi, Brandon. Hi, guys. How's it going? I haven't seen y'all in 2 weeks.
No, we're
'Cause I was
missing you.
I was on vacation, which is really code for I took my children to see every stitch of family that they have, which is not vacation for me anyway. For them, they had the time of their lives. I'm worn out and I'm glad to be back at work because now I'm like, oh, I can take a break, you know?
Every fall.
Probably very relatable to some of you.
To some, yes, to some, no. Depends if we're child's at heart. So I was mentioning, yeah, Jory came back to work to relax.
I
I
did.
got a little tight last week.
We only gave you a small mental breakdown. I threw some other things on the agenda so that it would be like the mic breakdown would be interspersed between other stuff.
Mind blown. A hash made up of partial components. I'm still
Yes.
mind blown. but
Everything
I'm
is
not ready to go to war on it anymore. Whatever.
So I'll say this, it exists today.
Yeah, I figured that out.
I was about to share a screen, but I realized I can't share my screen today. So sad Brandon. And
You can't share your, what, is there something wrong with your screen? Should I
Zoom
share
bug.
this? Oh, a Zoom bug, okay. Do you want me to share screen?
You could if you want to, but I was going to share my command line to show
Oh,
command.
well, I can't share your command line. Sorry.
The fun image to look at, Mike, is I'll just post it in the chat here.
I also looked up a lot more detail about what SHA-0 was all about in SHA-1, and it's not quite as bad as it's been made out to be. So
Want to see, or a good time, try this image. Where's the chat? Here we go. Play with that one, Mike. It's got a bunch of 512 layers, but the manifest itself couldn't be pushed. So the manifest itself is a SHA-256. Because we don't have a way to push it otherwise right now. So
no choice.
yeah.
Well, if you made the decision to make the layers, that makes sense. Well, it doesn't make sense, but okay.
Yeah, so all the layers in there are 512, and if you try to run it, things break.
I don't know, if Derek, if you heard, so last week we were talking about situations where the manifest or some other artifact may be one SHA, but the layer is another. And some layers could be a different one. It's a complete mix. And that just sort of blew my mind that you wouldn't have something of a requirement that the entire DAG would all be at the same SHA level. It just sort of blew my mind last week.
I'll drop you a few more fun links, which is to show how other tools show that image. And yeah, the Registry Explorer usually has a link on every digest. Doesn't for this. And all the links are there, all broken. And the Docker inspection of it is just like, I don't know what this is. These layers, none of them make sense to me, so it just gives up. Shows nothing.
Okay. Hmm.
So, all right. Mentioned earlier to other people, I have a Zoom bug on my laptop. I could share my screen. I can't stop sharing my screen without crashing the app. So good times all around. So I just don't share right now until Zoom gives me an update or I verify something else updated and fixed it. I threw a few actionable items in the agenda. There are a couple of PRs on distribution spec. Yeah, Zoom does not like my SHA digest at all. There is a couple PRs there on distribution spec, 325 and 541, that both could use some maintainer reviews one way or another, and thumbs up, thumbs down. Hopefully we get those merged. I think you might have reviewed one or both of those, Mike. Can't be sure. So maybe since Derek is here, those would be good ones to look at. Okay, well, Derek did the 404 one. And Mike, you have done the repository terminology, the PR 325. So if each of you review the other one, then we get two in there. So those are just a couple action items that we can move forward with at some point when either of you have some time. And otherwise, I pulled in a couple things I saw that were floating around this week and things I fear we could chat about. One was issue 545. Somebody was asking, can we change the order that the tag listing comes back in? I saw that and thought, how many things is that going to break? Or is that possible? I guess it could potentially be done with an argument. I don't know how many registries would support that if we added the option. And I don't know how much that would fix their problem, considering that the Simver ordering isn't necessarily reverse lexical order. Simver is its own ordering in there. They're looking for kind of the latest by Simver, and that's, I don't know how much we would get out of that. But that is issue number 545 over in distribution spec. Maybe it'll be easier if we allowed some kind of tag ordering based on most recently push tag first. that would be a whole different ordering of what they're asking about here. And that would mean some other data being tracked by the registry that's not public knowledge. And thanks for that review, Derek. I'm guessing for that PR 325, no showstoppers or blockers keeping
You
us
want
from
more
merging it.
reviews on that one? I was just hovering over the merge button.
Yeah, I'm fine merging it. Throw an extra term
Cool.
in there. I appreciate it. And the other one, I think that's going to take a little bit of time. Oh, thanks, Mike. Wasn't sure if that was going to take you more time to look through and make sure I didn't break anything in there.
I had already looked at it. Just didn't hit the button last time.
Awesome. 2 merges in 1 meeting. We're done. That's it. No, sorry, Jory. I'll still keep talking. Let's see. So tag listing order, anybody have thoughts on that one? I feel like everybody was still looking back at the actionable items there. Do other people want to see the tag ordering able to be changed? Deep thoughts, no thoughts, indifferent. Maybe registries just give all the tags a lot quicker and we don't have to worry about what order they show up in.
I intentionally have no opinion on tag listing, so. whatever.
So I think, Ram, the idea that I would put forward if there was an option for the tag ordering is that the client could request a specific order. And so it would still be a specific order that comes back, but it's not just a single order that the registry is imposing. I'm kind of indifferent myself, but I understand the request. I think the way they phrase the request doesn't really align with the problem they're trying to solve, though. I feel like the problem they're trying to solve is tell me about the new tags, but we also want to know about tags that have been modified with a different digest or something like that. All right. No opinion on
Yeah,
that one.
I don't think that tag listing is going to be a very good solution for that. I mean, I think in the end, it's pull them all and sync it if you're doing that. Otherwise, some sort of notification stream is the way to go.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to let that one sit unless folks want to go in there and chime in on that one. Sajay wants tag history. I do need to start working on that tag API at some point here. I've got myself pulled into other directions. The unordered chunk push. Rob, you are here, so I'm going to throw this one over at you. Issue 546. I know I just kind of threw you under the bus there all of a sudden.
No, that's okay. So I think this is I think we need improvements across all areas, I think. So from the distribution spec, we need at least the claim is that we can improve performance if you start pushing and pulling parts of large artifacts in parallel. And at least the pull part, I think there is some evidence that it probably helps. So now the question I think is, what about the push part? So looks like I think there is a potential for just supporting this with a minor change in the language, but there are concerns on what breaks. So some more evidence is needed that if you take a very large artifact and you want to just push parts of it in parallel, that probably helps. But we need evidence for it. So I'm looking at whether I can patch Zod to support this to see if it actually works.
Yeah, I would be curious about first, how much of a performance increase you're going to get because you're talking about instead of one TCP connection to a single IP, multiple TCP connections to the same IP. they should be interlaced with each other. So I don't see that much of bandwidth increase unless you're really talking multiple servers in the back end or taking different paths or something like that. And so on the flip side of that, I'm worried that if you start pushing multiple chunks out of order with each other and start pushing later content earlier, that now you have to follow up after you pushed all the data and do the digest at the end, rather than doing the digest continuously as you're receiving the data.
Correct, yes.
So that one to me, I'm not sure how much of a performance increase you're going to see out of that, if any. Maybe.
But there could be surprises because TCP and buffers and things are not known until we try an experiment.
I also want to be careful we don't over optimize for a single user talking to a specific registry, because there are going to be a lot of registries out there that are worried about users flooding them with too many requests, too many connections at once, and they want to optimize for overall serving a lot of users.
Yeah, that could be a policy that maybe you enforce outside of the spec. There is rather than the spec. Yeah, we will have the discussion separately. You may say, for example, a registry may have large artifacts, you may charge more, and then may allow this for them, but not for others. So things like that.
I'm just thinking Docker Hub already has rate limits on how many manifests you can pull in a certain time period. I don't imagine pushing a chunk with a whole bunch of concurrent requests are going to be something that makes their job any easier. But, all right. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Is it something you want to see? Another quiet group today. Should we talk about the SHA-512s then? I put the link out there, or I put the image name out there to let you see that it does exist. If anybody tries to run it, it's not a malicious image. It's just regctl, an old version of regctl with the Alpine layers add on to it. So it is a valid image, but Docker won't run it because it tries to verify in the config each of the digest in the extracted layers, and it's expecting those in a SHA 256 and not a 512. And so when I changed the config, that broke Docker. The registry didn't like it at all. I think the scanners out there that are scanning the content, they don't like it at all. And I can't push the manifest with the SHA-512, so that didn't work. So I found a lot of ways to break things. Did a good job breaking the registry all over the place. But I am curious if folks, I feel like we need to better support what's in the spec. The spec says that 512 digests are allowed, but I also think that some of that is going to require a couple changes to the spec. And right now CI is broken because ZOT doesn't work with this either. But the two changes I'm suggesting, if you open up the PR 543, in the spec MD file in there, so that's kind of at the end of the PR, I have included that for a blob push, if they see a digest they don't recognize or is not supported, they can give a 400 bad request. Similar if you saw it other places. If you're uploading a blob and you're going to give the digest later on, you're not going to give the digest up front, you can do a digest dash algorithm equals whatever the algorithm is on the post request as a URL parameter. So you can tell the registry in advance, I'm getting ready to send you a blob. I don't know what the digest is yet. I'm streaming this content over the network right now. Once I'm done, here's the algorithm I will use at the end. And so you use that on the post, you do your patch, and then on the put request, you'll say, okay, here was the digest I gave you at the very end. And the registry would, in that case, not have to go back and redigest the entire blob if it would have been doing a SHA 256, assuming that was normal client, and then find out at the end that this client wanted to give me a Blake 3 digest. I don't even support that. Let me reject it now. Be nice to get that information up front in the beginning of the request. And then on the manifest push, I included the digest equals as a URL parameter there if you're pushing by tag. And that's kind of the challenge when I started pushing my content. I couldn't push to the distribution project and some others the manifest with a SHA-512. And if I push it with a tag, the registry assigns the digest for you. You don't get to tell it what the digest is. And so this is saying, give me a URL parameter that can add on to that request that passes the digest and says, when I push this tag, here's the digest I'm associating with it. So between all those are the spec changes in there. And then conformance went all kinds of crazy for me to try to get this into conformance. I'd love to redesign some of the conformance stuff, just seeing how I was fighting through trying to make some of this work in conformance. But that might be a later discussion. With those changes, ROM, I think CI is failing because we have Zod as the registry we spin up to test this. I've tested against OlaReg, the little side project of my own. What do you think about setting this up on the Zot side to see if you're able to get that working over there?
Okay, we'll fix it. Yeah. Did you file an issue against that, Brandon?
I didn't file it against Zot, but I tagged you in the PR 543 to say,
Okay.
what do you think about trying to include this in Zot?
Okay, I'll take a look.
And then what do other registries think about that? I know we've got Derek here. So
I sent this to the hub team. I'm not sure that if you reported it with the hub team, but there was a discussion going on about 512. So I don't know if that started it or they just were already looking at it.
I had someone ping me and say, hey, Derek, pass this over. So I'm aware conversations have been happening over there. And then I think the distribution project itself, that would need it as well. I suspect everything I'm seeing here is because of distribution, so that's just going to trickle down to Hub and GitHub Container Registry and others that are using distribution as their base. But yeah, I broke everything. I don't think Mike wants to talk about this anymore.
It does make sense to start, with the should argument, and with possibly a must in a next release that we need to start, from the client telling the server what to use, right? It makes some sense. Before you push the manifest, how would they know, right? It would have to be some kind of defaults.
I mean, I wonder if it needs to be a little bit more of a negotiation though, because should the server also send what algorithm it's using?
That's what
So
I'm thinking. Yeah.
If the registry doesn't tell you that it's using that algorithm, you should assume it's using SHA-256.
But if you've got content that's going between registries, if you're mirroring content, you don't necessarily have the option to change it without breaking other things in there.
Yeah, but I said it's a negotiation. You can send this query parameter up to the registry, but the registry, you don't know if the registry is ignoring it or not until you get to the end. Whereas if the registry returns a header that says what algorithm it's using, then you'll know whether or not the registry's actually computing it.
So a fast fail, but still not great from the client side that wants to be able to copy content.
I mean, yeah, if the registry doesn't support it, but
yeah,
at least having that be an initiation.
I got the impression seeing some of the responses, Tina and I were going back and forth on this after the meeting last week. The underlying digest inside of hub and probably distribution as well is a SHA-256 on each one of the blobs, but you can reference it with the SHA-512. So it's very curious. It's like quasi both. The location header you get back is saying, here's the 256 version of it, but you gave it the 512 name, so it'll respond to that. I think in general, this is just like the tip of breaking a lot of things all at once, but at the very least, I feel like the spec should be somewhat consistent if we're going to support both, that we should say how to support both.
Did you note the text about context digest headers that could, for canonical digest could be different than what was actually pushed originally? Just saying that there was already a concept of canonical digest.
Yeah, there's a concept of canonical digest, but the spec says you're allowed to use 512 as one of the supported algorithms.
On the
So
push, on the push or the pull.
anywhere there's a digest, theoretically.
Yeah.
And the place this gets into a lot of trouble is now we have an image that's been pushed potentially with a pinned digest. And so people are relying on that digest not change when you copy the content from one registry to another. You've got associated refers that have been pushed with this. Maybe the refer is a signature that's signing a digest, or an SBOM that's on a digest of a manifest. And so we can't rely on the registry saying, hey, I don't support this, so change your digest for me and repush the content. Once you do that, it breaks that content portability.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it breaks everything. So maybe you should just strip out the 512 support. I think that would upset other people, though.
Apparently.
All right. Yeah, I think you're right on that, Derek. This was very much a, before we even talk about Blake 3 support, then let's make sure that the SHA-512 support is in there and works, and then we've got a path to add Blake 3 in the future. But without the ability to flip between a supported digest.
Yeah, it's a weird state right now because even like the Blake 3 implementations are not in the standard library. And it's like, well, we want to support it when it's there. But so I mean, I'm supportive of the multi-hash, but I definitely don't want to encourage use of 512 because it just doesn't add anything.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Is the expectation that the manifest will also be Blake 3 at that point? Or is it going to be mixed?
I like the idea of the same digest everywhere to make Mike happy.
Okay, well, disclaimer, I'm not a security expert, but what would it mean to have a digest of a manifest that's a 512 or 256 and it's a different algorithm for the layers?
From the security view, and I think this is where Mike was going last week, is that if you mix all the digest algorithms, you get the security of the worst algorithm.
Right. It's always the weakest, right? So what's the point in actually having the layers Blake 3 and the manifest in a different
I think this goes to Ram's comment, which is performance, and what Brian's saying. The performance of Blake 3 is significantly better.
It's not really a security thing. It's more of a which one is more discrete and not having the opportunity to overlay, right? To get a duplicate ID.
Well, a hash collision I would
Not,
follow
not
with security.
encrypting. We're not using encryption for these, right?
But there are strong guarantees that we get that the content can be verified, right? So
Stronger guarantees, yes.
yeah, so the verification still holds. It's less about the
Yeah.
the secrecy of the entity itself.
Right.
So two properties, right, which are important is collision from the inputs. You don't want to find two inputs that will collide. First property. Second property is pre-match. Given the hash, you cannot guess what the input is. So these are the two important properties here. The first one is actually the more important. The second one, yeah, if you don't want to leak privacy and all of that stuff, then the second one also becomes important. But a node Blake 3 is blazingly fast. Okay, so it's orders of magnitude faster than SHA. SHA family is single-threaded, right? It is sequential, so you have that problem. But Blake is parallel, massively parallel.
Do the CPUs provide hardware acceleration for either of these? Do we know? For compiler optimizations, that sort of thing.
I
SHA.
feel like. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, sorry. To argue in the favor of SHAs, there are like just like AES-NI, there's a SHA-NI extensions for CPUs, which actually AMD has done a better job than Intel. So that accelerates SHA quite a bit. That's also significant. So that's something to consider. But overall, I think if you allow multiple types of hashes, I think you are going to end up with mixed case. You have to design for that, at least the mechanics of things. Now we may come back and say look, here is the guidance. Don't mix it because it makes it harder or breaks things or security or whatever. That's a guidance we can come out with. But in terms of handling these cases, we should be able to handle them. Handle the mixed case. That's what I mean.
At least one of the Go implementations out there has linked to free, Mike. They've optimized it for a couple of CPU instructions, AVX2, SSE 4.1. So I believe based on just that description that the answer is yes, but I don't have a solid understanding.
We usually don't cover performance issues very often in this spec. But I like the idea of having some examples and suggestions and using that information as a reason for doing things like Derek mentioned, some kind of negotiation, even if has to flow through the chain to the originating, right, to find out what was originally stored. It does sort of make sense to say, what are the, what's the default and what are what are my options when you're throwing it up to make sure that they support some kind of a combined, and at least to know what the default is, so when the client's building the images, it can use the SHA that it's going to be pushing. Especially when we start talking about artifacts being on multiple registries. And these new registries may want to use a different digest algorithm.
Looking at Derek's question. Go ahead and finish point, Mike.
No, just thinking through.
I was looking at Derek's question about the FS Verity. Wouldn't that be an alternative to a tar gzip? And so
maybe, I mean, I guess the point is like, what if we also consider just different ways of computing the hash altogether, rather than always having to be the sequential hash. But I mean, something like FS Verity is much better for like being able to compute in parallel and stuff, so it has those same advantages. I mean, I think right now a lot of that's looked at is like, hey, we're gonna have two hashes. If you have FS Verity, you might have a separate FS Verity root hash, and then you might have your sequential blob hash. but you don't necessarily need both. It's more of a thought exercise, but I mean, it's as we think about kind of expanding it, you know,
Would
should
that
we
be-
think about more than just expanding it in the algorithm?
Would that be implemented more like some of the Sochi and other stuff where they use an annotation to say this is the root of the FS Verity that you need to load that, but the actual content addressable storage digest we would be the normal sequential blob, and so you'd end up with both digest inside of the descriptor, but one's an annotation and one's the digest itself.
It depends. I mean, yeah, for having FS Verity of the tar GZ doesn't make sense, but you know, if you have something like ArrowFS, then it's might be more relevant. But yeah, I think from the case here, it's just, yeah, maybe there's more data we would need for FS Verity, but it's covering the same thing, and it's just a different way of computing hash over the entire blob.
Yeah, but when like the Sochi and Star GZ, eStar GZ and some of those other ones, they would put the hash of the table of contents because you need to be able to verify that as you're going through and you're walking that structure at a high level there. You're going through the pieces at a different way. And so they had to put that hash in there, but it couldn't be the hash of the digest of the blob because all the tooling is expecting it to be content addressable.
Yeah, I mean
So-
that's different though. Like that's hashing of like the file system, whereas FS Verity is covering like a block. So you could have an FS Verity hash for that covers like a blob, but it could also just cover a whole block device.
I got the impression it wasn't the file system, but it's a chunk of the blob that they were saying. If you pull this chunk of the blob, that's the table of contents. This is the digest over there. And so I feel like that maps very similar to FS Verity saying, here's the digest of the root node of what you're getting ready to pull. And then you follow that down because it's got its own Merkle tree kind of built into it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess my point there is that in terms of like what's over the wire, it might not be byte for byte matching because you're pulling subsets out. And I don't think that hash necessarily covers every blob everything that you pulled from the registry. I might be wrong there though.
The table of contents in the Sochi was also like like an embedded Merkle tree, I think, because they're saying here's the root node of all the different contents there, and then you walk it through. I see people chatting all over the place, so maybe I'm missing some of the context there, but I feel like there's similar concepts, and so it makes me think that to not break all the existing tooling, you would treat the overall descriptor digest as the normal blob content addressable store. And then FS Verity, if they're doing their own Merkle tree in there with their own block of data that they're digesting separately, you'd pass that as an annotation.
Yeah, I guess the point is like, if you're using Sochi or these other cases, like you don't necessarily want to pull all the content down from the registry. So the client can't actually verify the descriptor hash. So we have kind of two hashes. And I mean, both of them should be in the manifest Merkle tree, but it's as like an annotation. But for cases where you have a block device, or you're not necessarily going to sequentially read it because it's not just like a tar we're going to untar, then we don't necessarily like right now the whole method that we compute and verify the digest is highly tied into the fact that it's a tar stream that is read through from beginning to end. Whereas as soon as you move away from that, like the whole method of just everything reading from beginning to end, compute the tar doesn't make much sense. And the client will never do that if they're not pulling down the whole piece of content.
So I would say the client pushing cares that it's a full stream. The registry might care that it's a full stream. It's just the consuming client that's pulling it that wants to do unordered pulls of just individual data, maybe a just-in-time pull of blocks. They're the ones that
maybe, but I mean, as Ron was trying to talk about with like the parallel push, it'd be much better for a parallel push to not have that, because yeah, it becomes very inefficient to do parallel push when you have to like go back and like basically store the blocks and then pull them back out later on. Oh, just a thought exercise, but
Yeah.
something like I think it's worth considering how we could solve that better instead of just like saying have two hashes.
My pushback is knowing how much stuff we're going to break, because I've already broken everything with the SHA-512, and if you start changing the concept of what's content addressable, that's gonna chaos everywhere.
I mean, my hope is it's not changing necessarily what's content addressable, but yeah, it is changing from like a Merkle tree style to a sequential. Basically, it's one big block versus a Merkle tree of smaller blocks.
Like they said it before, pages. Pages of virtual memory that are being swapped in one at a time, each having its own SHA.
I mean, but in the end, it's still a hash. It's just how that hash is computed.
Yeah, if we change how we compute the hash of our content addressable store, we will break people.
Yeah, well, we're already breaking people. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess the point is, yeah, we're adding stuff that requires changes. So should we consider like how it's computed, not just the algorithm when we do this?
Yeah. Perhaps don't call it SHA-256 in that case. That would be an
Or-
disparity
Yeah.
256.
Or it's what it, some combination of SHAs is, I think, where you're headed to. One way to support 256 and 512 is to pass both, store both, and annotate the one that's not the default.
You can annotate, but then you can't pull it by digest.
You could, if they stored it under two files, one by each digest, using the annotation as a reference.
So the registry wouldn't necessarily look at the annotation. The registry is going to look at the API call that pushed it. Unless
Unless it
we
knows how
change
to
the
parse the
registry.
manifest and look for the
Yeah. But that manifest is going to come after the registry has already accepted the blob.
yeah. But same thing. Now you're breaking up the blob. What is a blob? If the blob has a header or shying the pages of the blob, sounds familiar. I think we've done this before. It sounds like a codec.
Break all of the things.
No, it's not breaking things.
I'm good at breaking things.
Sorry. I've been around for so long. I've done dynamic link libraries and P linkers. I've done this before. It's going to be fun. Where is that page that I needed? Oh, okay. It's not actually an index all the time. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Never mind.
All right. I think we veered enough off of the SHA-512 concerns, and hopefully that one we'll just keep thinking about that for a bit. I'm gonna hope that ROM can get a second implementation up there. I've got mine passes the conformance test that I wrote, but I never trust that, because if you're the person writing the conformance test and the person testing the conformance test at the same time, you might include something in your assumptions other people didn't. So I'd love to see other people try to support that.
Day or two, run. Yeah, that would test it.
Yeah. Otherwise, the only other things I threw on the agenda were a couple of conformance test things in general. One CI is broken. I think we recently broke it. So that is conformance issue 106 sitting there in the agenda. And poor Tionon's getting all the notifications from CI breaking right now. But I think when we added some of the changes to swap some characters, if a tool had a space in it, we did some stuff to make the tag work that was referencing that thing. And I think the changes we put in there to make that work weren't correct. So I don't know all the stuff, all the tools used over there well enough to give a good answer. But Just thought I'd raise some awareness. CI is a little broken over there. For anyone digging down this. Looks like a Jekyll issue. Not sure if you want to know Jekyll. And where is the other stuff in there? Yeah, it's an unexpected range dollar key equals value. It's like we did a Go template, but we're parsing it with a Jekyll processor, and it's just not working over there. Looks like the tool name is Liquid. I don't know that one either. So I can learn some front end stuff to try to sort that out. I think I'm probably have to install Node on my machine to even run this. But otherwise, if people have an idea, feel free to chime in. Everybody disappears when it's not a Go language thing, though. The other one to chat about, I probably need to DM Josh on this one, but his bundle bar project, I think he had deprecated a long time ago, took it away, and so if it's no longer there, we should probably pull it out of the conformance test. So I don't believe it exists anymore. And beyond that, if you're looking through my PR on the 512 stuff, you'll see that I was going all over the place, creating all kinds of different objects and whatnot. And I feel like the overall design of the conformance test probably needs to be changed dramatically. The way the conformance tests right now are done, there is a single image being created for each set of tests. And so there's a test for pulling content, a test for pushing content, test for discovery, and some management and other stuff. So between the different tests, each one has its one image manifest. And so if we want to test, does a registry work with an artifact? Does a test work with an index? Does it work with the subject refer, unknown fields, and stuff? Whatever test we want to put in there would have to go into that one manifest we create, or we start creating other manifests outside of that. And I feel like we just kind of like grew beyond the comfort area of the way the tests were designed. So I'm thinking about redesigning some of it. Figured I would kind of float the trial balloon out there, let people know that I was at least thinking about that. But we got a bunch of external dependencies. I think a bunch of the external dependencies going to Josh's project. I feel more comfortable we pulled some of that back into the distribution repo or into an OCI repo. I think a bunch of it is authentication, so gets a little fuzzy in there how much we want to get into that. And then beyond that, I'd love to change it to some kind of matrix design of here are all the various different APIs we want to test. And also here are all the different kinds of content we want to test against those APIs. And then you're testing both kind of concurrently. So I'm thinking along that. And we've also got a design where every test has a setup, run the test, and a teardown step. And I'm wondering if it makes more sense to just say, instead of doing a setup, just have the push step at the very beginning. And then the teardown would be at the very end of just the delete step. And then if you skip those tests, well, you're responsible for putting the content up there ahead of time. And if you skip the delete, well, you're responsible for cleaning up the test after it's done its thing. And that way we just have one workflow that goes through all the tests all at once. So I'm thinking about that. Kind of wanted to float the idea with the crew here, make sure I'm not too far off base. But yeah, some of the stuff when I was doing the 512 test, I was rewriting the world to try to make that one happen. And I feel like we kind of grew past the comfort area of the conformance tests as they are today. I did a whole lot of talking there, and I'm staring at a bunch of pictures here. So if anybody's got opinions, feel free to chime in. At least now I'm smiling, looking at Mike's happy face. So you don't seem terrified that I want to rewrite conformance. Okay.
I don't know, it makes me a little nervous when things get rewritten because we've had a couple versions already. You might, if you want to start from scratch for a V1.1 upgrade and but keep the 1.0s sticking around in another bucket, maybe.
So when you run conformance test, if you say you want to run the 1.1 conformance test, it checks out the tag from the distribution spec at the 1.1 release. So whatever we have in the conformance of 1.1 cannot change.
Okay, all right, you're good. But, yeah, okay, that's cool.
It also means if there's a bug in the conformance test that breaks the 1.1 checks, we're stuck with it. We got to release a 1.1.1.
Did we not split a separate branch?
Nope. It is there for life. We're locked into it.
Potentially, okay, let's create another.
I
Let's
think
raise hands for creating another branch.
it would end up going in a whole nother repo, and then you're splitting conformance from the spec. And there is some value to me to saying
Why
whenever we
would it
make a
be another
spec
repo?
change. Well, I mean, you can maintain as a whole separate branch of the thing, but then whenever you push a change, you're pushing up 2 PRs, one for the spec change and a separate PR for a separate branch to the separate conformance test change. I like having them together.
But yeah, I'm not familiar with what you're trying to say, why we have to, usually you just create another branch.
Well, if you create a branch so the conformance can change at a separate rate from the spec, every time I make a change to the spec.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant for main. For the next release, right?
What would be in the branch?
Be in main, but the prior would be, we take a tag and go ahead and create a branch for that tag. So we'd have maintenance if we wanted to make a modification to, the prior tag branch.
I might be missing what direction you're going. What would be inside the branch?
The last release.
And then what would you do with that? Would you update the last release on the modifying the release?
No, you have a main and you create a new branch for the next release instead of just using tags.
So how would that be different from a tag? What
you can
the
push
tag to me says when you push the tag, it's there, it's locked, you're done with it. If you have a branch that says you're able to change
you can modify the prior release with a fix if you had to, like a conformance fix.
Wouldn't that just be like wouldn't that just be a patch release though? Just make a 1.1.1.
Yes. No,
I like just making a patch
it could be a
release.
1.1.1 if you needed to make a fix, but it wouldn't change. It just allows you to do maintenance on your prior release. Right now, you can't because it's already tagged. You're done, right?
Well,
we
we've
have
done
code
branches on the
conformance.
fly when we needed them, but that was very much a one-off, and I wasn't involved in that one. But we did a branch at one point. We
Right.
said, "Hey, we got a security fix. We got to push this out." So we made a branch off of the 1.0 and made a small fix out there.
Right. So instead of having just temporary one-off branches for the whatever, right, and the main is the only thing we're actually ever going to modify, you would actually create a branch when you tag a new release. You'd create a branch. Creating more maintenance work, yes. Cherry picks. A cherry pick process for any modifications that needed to go back in conformance. But the only reason I'm mentioning it is because you're talking about refactoring code.
Yeah, I'd started going down the path of maintain the 1.0 branch that we created, because we created the 1.0 branch for one of the security fixes, and people were asking for a release before the 1.1 release went out, and that never got approved by the maintainer. So I don't know how much we can work down that path. It takes more than just one person doing it, I guess.
Yeah, this is sort of like let's vote. Do we want to use branches?
Yeah.
For
when I was trying to do that before, everybody said, no, we're just going to do everything on main.
okay.
If folks feel otherwise, I'll be all ears, because I was trying to go that path before. And that's the way I manage some of my own personal projects, is I have a branch per minor release so that I can push patches if I need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I wasn't able to get that for the 1.0 branch. So the 1.0 branch already existed, and I was trying to cherry pick everything back over. It was not the prettiest git commit, because we had gone a long way since that release.
Yeah, I think we've got some overall project questions to answer and talk about maybe at the next KubeCon. Things like, do we want to go ahead and do that version API that Vince, proposed?
When is the next KubeCon? Because that might be a good Jory question here of, do we have a room?
Yeah, so actually one of the topics I was curious about with you guys was, if anybody had given further thought into their attendance. KubeCon North America is coming up this fall, which it's already the halfway through the year, which blows my mind. So if you are around in November and want to come to Utah, which is a lovely place to be, and visit, I would love to know, because we can get a room according to the size of the group that will be available to attend. Maybe quick thumbs up or so if you're planning to go. We had sent a poll on
Depends
Slack.
the speaker, agree, if we get speakers, then yeah, it's easy to go.
Yeah, and I think
Say,
when we
I need to go there because I'm one of the speakers, and you get free tickets, and managers generally more amenable.
Yeah, when we asked a few weeks ago in Slack, there was mostly people saying, I'm not sure yet. So and to Sam's point, sometimes it depends on employer approval, if your organization is sponsoring, if you're speaking, that kind of thing. So maybe I'll set a goal for us to know by we'll say mid-August. Since we're just looking for a meeting room, that's very easy for the LF events team and the team to accommodate. But I would say by mid-August, we ought to know if we want to grab a room or not. So
When do CFP approvals get announced?
that is actually a really good question. Let me see if I can find that out.
Because I think that's going to affect a lot of people. If folks have submitted a CFP and it gets approved, then if they're like me, I just tell the boss, hey, I got a speaking thing approved, so you're going to pay for my travel. And the boss is like, yeah, okay. If I say I want to go to this conference and let me pay for a ticket and my travel and everything else, the boss is like, no, not happening.
Yep.
For me right now, the boss is saying not happening for everything, but that's different boss.
I'm assuming she's in another room. Or
No, it's the
there,
retirement fund.
yeah.
The retirement fund says, yeah, you gotta.
Oh, the retirement fund. Okay. I was gonna say, I almost just brought it out. I couldn't remember if we're recording or not. Who is the boss? Come on, tell us. Okay.
No, I've not picked a new employer.
Okay.
So it looks like the CFP deadline was Sunday, and so that's passed. Typically, they will take a couple of weeks to do the CFP review, and then I'm just gonna say by mid-August, you all should know if your talks are accepted. They didn't post that detail on the website. So I'll see if I can ask internally if they know, but my guess would be sometime the week of mid-August they would announce. And yeah.
Notifications August 12th.
August 12th. Okay, perfect.
Thanks to Joseph.
Thanks, Joseph. You found the link I was looking for. And I was pretty close to right. So cool. August 12th. So August 15th, probably.
Yeah, schedule announcement on the 14th. So we would know if you asked us on the 15th, I think you would get at least a few people that would say one way or another they've gotten a talk approved. All right. With that, I think we hit time. I know some people have to run right at the top of the hour, so I won't hold people past that. But yeah, have a great rest of the week, and I'll see how much more I can break with SHA 512s. Sorry, Mike.
Have
That's
fun
okay.
with that.
I feel a lot better knowing that it wasn't as clean and doable as we wanted, but yeah, nor were there any restrictions that we should be applying yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
there are things I can't push it by 512 as a manifest by digest. So even that's completely broken. So, all right. Have a good one, everybody.
Throw some Blake in.
There we go.
Cheers.
Cheers.